He thought the badge made him untouchable, until the woman on the floor became the most powerful person in the building. The sound of polished shoes stopped all at once inside the marble lobby of the Jefferson Federal Center. Conversations died mid-sentence. Coffee cups froze halfway to lips. Even the revolving doors seemed to slow as dozens of eyes turned toward the same place. A woman in a navy blazer stood near the security desk, one hand steady against the edge of the counter, her expression calm in a room that had suddenly forgotten how to breathe. Officer Daniel Brooks stood a few feet away, chest high, jaw tight, the silver badge on his uniform catching the white ceiling lights like a spotlight he believed belonged only to him. He had spent 14 years wearing authority the way some men wear expensive cologne. Too much, too often, and certain everyone noticed. This morning had started like every other morning for Brooks. He barked at delivery drivers, waved attorneys through without checking credentials, and made people wait simply because he could. Power, even in small doses, had become a habit. Then she walked in. No entourage, no designer labels, no raised voice, just a black leather briefcase, low heels clicking across the stone floor, and the kind of posture that didn't ask permission from anyone. Her name, though no one there knew it yet, was Vanessa Carter. She moved with measured confidence, glancing once at the American flag in the lobby, once at the bank of elevators, then toward the security checkpoint where Brooks leaned back in his chair like a king guarding a paper throne. Some people carry fear into federal buildings. Vanessa carried silence. Brooks noticed her immediately, and not for the reasons he would later claim. He noticed because calm people unsettled men like him. He straightened, stepped into her path, and held out one hand. ID. His tone wasn't procedure. It was challenge. Vanessa reached into her blazer pocket and offered a credential wallet. Brooks looked at it for less than a second before snapping it shut. Cute trick, he said loudly enough for the nearby line to hear. A few nervous smiles appeared, then vanished. Vanessa didn't react. She simply held out her hand again. Please return that. Her voice was low, steady, unmistakably controlled. Brooks laughed. You people always walk in here acting important. The words landed heavier than the room's silence. A young intern near the metal detector lowered her eyes. An older janitor paused his cart and stared at the floor. Nobody moved. Nobody ever moved when uniforms turned ugly. Vanessa's gaze stayed on Brooks, unblinking, almost patient. Return my credentials, she said again. For a moment, something flickered in Brooks's expression. Not conscience. Instinct. The ancient warning some people feel right before they make the worst decision of their lives. But pride is louder than instinct. He stepped closer, invading the space she never surrendered, and shoved the briefcase aside with the back of his hand. Papers did not spill. Vanessa caught it before it dropped. The room inhaled sharply. You don't belong here, Brooks said. Vanessa adjusted the handle of the case, straightened her jacket, and gave him one final chance with 4 words. Think carefully, Officer Brooks. Hearing his own name from a stranger should have stopped him cold. Instead, it lit the fuse. He reached forward in one sharp motion, meant to humiliate more than harm, and the room gasped as Vanessa staggered one step, then steadied herself with perfect balance. No scream, no outrage, no fear, just stillness. Brooks smirked, certain he had won. Then Vanessa slowly lifted her eyes to meet his, and for the first time that morning, Officer Daniel Brooks looked uncertain. Because somewhere beyond the lobby doors, footsteps were approaching in formation. Fast, synchronized, unmistakable. And the woman he thought he had diminished was suddenly smiling. The smile on Vanessa Carter's face was not warm. It was the kind of smile that appears when a storm has already been scheduled. The synchronized footsteps grew louder across the polished stone entrance, sharp and measured, echoing through the vast lobby until every person near the security desk turned toward the doors. 4 men and 2 women in dark suits entered first, earpieces visible, eyes scanning corners and exits with practiced precision. Behind them came another line carrying folders, sealed cases, and the unmistakable confidence of people who did not need to announce authority, because authority moved with them. Officer Daniel Brooks straightened his shoulders and reached for the radio clipped to his chest, but his hand stopped halfway there when the lead agent stepped directly past him as if he were part of the furniture. Director Carter, the woman said, voice crisp and immediate. The teams are in position. The room changed in one breath. Brooks looked from the agent to Vanessa, then back again, trying to force the scene into something that made sense. It would not. Vanessa adjusted the sleeve of her blazer, picked up her briefcase, and handed it calmly to one of the arriving agents. "Thank you, Agent Miller," she said. Her tone was simple, almost casual, but the effect was seismic. The intern near the metal detector covered her mouth. The janitor gripped his cart with both hands. Two attorneys near the elevator stepped backward without realizing they had moved. Brooks gave a short laugh that sounded hollow even to himself. "Director," he said. "Of what?" Vanessa met his eyes for a long moment, letting the question hang in the silence he had created. Then she answered softly. "Federal Bureau of Investigation." No one in the lobby spoke. Somewhere on the second floor, an elevator bell rang into the quiet and felt strangely out of place. Brooks swallowed. "That is not possible." Vanessa tilted her head slightly. "Interesting phrase. Men say that when reality arrives uninvited." Agent Miller opened the briefcase on the counter. Inside were organized files marked with colored tabs, digital drives and evidence sleeves, and photographs clipped to formal reports. The top folder carried one printed name in bold black letters. Daniel Brooks. His face lost color so quickly it seemed the building lights had dimmed around him. "This morning was never random," Vanessa said. "For 6 months, complaints involving misconduct, selective enforcement, intimidation, and tampered reports have crossed my desk. Every trail led back here." She glanced toward the security cameras, mounted above the lobby. "We wanted to see how this building behaved when it believed no one important was watching." Brooks took a step backward. "You set me up." "No," Vanessa replied. "You revealed yourself." Two more agents approached the desk carrying evidence boxes. One removed the hard drive from the security system. Another collected the sign and log. Captain Robert Hayes came hurrying from a side corridor, tie crooked, expression already rehearsing outrage. "What is going on here?" he demanded. Then he saw the credentials in Agent Miller's hand and slowed to a stop. Vanessa turned toward him. "Captain Hayes, thank you for joining us. We have questions regarding 12 missing internal reports, altered timestamps, and disciplinary files that disappeared under your command." Hayes opened his mouth, then closed it again. Brooks looked at the man who had protected him for years and found no protection left. The lobby, once ruled by smirks and uniforms, now belonged to paper, truth, and witnesses. Vanessa stepped closer to Brooks, not threatening, not angry, simply certain. "You mistook silence for weakness," she said. "That error has ended careers before." Brooks glanced around for support, but the crowd that once feared him had become something more dangerous than enemies. They had become observers, and observers remember everything. Captain Robert Hayes had built a career on confident answers, but confidence has a way of disappearing when facts arrive with badges of their own. He stood frozen near the security desk, one hand still gripping the knot of his tie, while agents moved around him with quiet efficiency. The morning crowd that once hurried through the Jefferson Federal Center no longer cared about schedules or meetings. Secretaries, attorneys, contractors, and clerks lingered along the lobby edges, pretending to check phones while listening to every word. Vanessa Carter understood something many powerful people never learn. Public silence can become public memory in a matter of seconds. She picked up the top file from the counter and opened it with measured calm. "Captain Hayes," she said, "on March 12th, a complaint from a disabled veteran reported unlawful detention in this lobby. Security footage was listed as corrupted." She turned one page. "On April 2nd, a law student reported racial harassment at screening. Witness statements vanished." Another page. "On May 9th, an elderly woman was denied medication access while waiting 3 hours for clearance. The report was marked resolved before anyone interviewed her." Hayes forced a dry laugh. "Administrative mistakes happen." Vanessa closed the folder. "Repeatedly, under the same command, always benefiting the same officer." Daniel Brooks looked as if he wanted the marble floor to open beneath him. Sweat gathered at his temple despite the air conditioning. "I followed procedure," he said, but the sentence sounded smaller than he expected. Agent Miller stepped forward holding a tablet. "Procedure usually does not include turning cameras away from incident areas," she said. She tapped the screen, and several still images appeared. Dates, times, angles shifted by hand, blind spots where none should exist. Brooks stared at the images like a man seeing his own handwriting in a confession. Vanessa walked toward the wide windows overlooking Constitution Avenue. Morning sunlight cut across the lobby floor in bright bands, illuminating dust that drifted through the air like unsettled history. "Do you know why systems fail?" she asked without turning around. No one answered. "Because decent people assume someone else will speak first." The intern near the metal detector swallowed hard. The older janitor slowly raised one hand. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I filed 2 complaints last year." Vanessa faced him fully now. "And what happened?" The man glanced at Hayes, then at Brooks. "Nothing." A murmur moved through the crowd. Another woman, a receptionist from the 6th floor, stepped forward. "I saw him throw away visitor forms." A courier added, "He used to make people wait outside in the rain." A young attorney said, "He called my client suspicious before checking any ID." One by one, voices rose from corners where fear had lived too long. Brooks looked around in disbelief. These were the same people who used to lower their eyes when he passed. Now they were looking directly at him, and that was somehow worse. Hayes tried to recover control. "This is becoming disorderly." "No," Vanessa said. "This is becoming honest." 2 agents approached Hayes with formal notices. One requested his building credentials. The other asked for his office keys. He hesitated only a second before surrendering both. Brooks took a step toward the exit, but Agent Miller blocked the path with nothing more than posture. "You are not being detained," she said evenly. "You are being observed." Those words landed harder than any threat. Vanessa returned to the security desk and placed a fresh document in front of Brooks. "Administrative leave effective immediately. Pending federal review." His hands trembled as he read. "You cannot do this to me." Vanessa's expression never changed. "No, Officer Brooks. You did this to yourself. We are simply documenting the date." Somewhere outside, sirens passed in the distance, fading quickly into city traffic. Inside the lobby, something far louder had ended. It was the old belief that a uniform could outshout the truth. By noon, the Jefferson Federal Center no longer felt like the same building. The lobby that had once run on hurried footsteps and lowered eyes now moved with a strange, careful stillness. Every sound seemed sharper. Elevator chimes, rolling carts, the rustle of paper. Even whispered conversations carried farther, as if the walls themselves had decided to listen. Officer Daniel Brooks sat alone on a bench near the security station, his uniform still pressed, his badge now sealed inside a clear evidence pouch on the counter 10 feet away. For the first time in years, people walked past him without changing direction. No one rushed to greet him. No one nodded. No one pretended not to notice. Indifference, he was learning, can feel heavier than fear. Captain Robert Hayes had been escorted upstairs to surrender access codes and departmental files. The office door that once stayed closed behind him now stood wide open while agents moved in and out carrying boxes. The crowd in the lobby watched each trip with quiet fascination. Systems look permanent until someone starts removing them one folder at a time. Vanessa Carter remained at the security desk reviewing statements with Agent Miller. She had not raised her voice once all morning. She did not need to. Her calm had become the strongest force in the room. One by one, employees approached to speak with her. A male clerk described being searched 3 times in 1 week, while others walked through freely. A paralegal recalled hearing Brooks joke that some people should need special permission to enter federal property. A maintenance supervisor explained how requests for camera repairs near the front entrance were repeatedly delayed. Each story sounded small when told alone. Together, they formed architecture. Brooks stared at the floor tiles while voices built the case around him. He wanted to interrupt, to challenge details, to demand context, but every sentence that rose in his throat died before reaching his mouth. He had spent years controlling rooms through volume. Now volume had no value. Around 1 o'clock, the same intern who had stood frozen by the metal detector earlier crossed the lobby carrying a stack of visitor badges. She paused near Brooks, hesitated, then kept walking without a word. It was nothing. It was everything. Brooks finally looked up when Vanessa approached. She carried no file this time. Only a paper cup of coffee she had not touched. She stood beside the bench, but did not sit. "Do you know what power is?" she asked. Brooks gave a bitter laugh. "You tell me." Vanessa watched the revolving doors turn slowly at the entrance. "Power is not making people smaller, so you can feel larger." Her voice remained even. "Power is making rules apply equally when no one is watching." Brooks shook his head. You came here to destroy me. No, she said. I came here to measure truth. You decided the result. He looked away again. Outside, rain had begun to fall, streaking the glass in silver lines. Pedestrians hurried beneath umbrellas while traffic lights reflected red and green across wet pavement. Inside, the building held its breath. Agent Miller approached with a sealed envelope. Director Carter, warrants approved for record seizure at Precinct Storage and Internal Affairs. Archives. Vanessa nodded once. Proceed. Brooks turned sharply. Internal Affairs? Yes, Vanessa said. Because misconduct rarely lives alone. That sentence hit him harder than any accusation yet. If the files opened, names would surface. Favors. Missing reports. Quiet deals. Men who laughed beside him in break rooms would suddenly forget they knew him. He felt the future closing in from directions he had never bothered to watch. Across the lobby, the janitor resumed pushing his cart. The squeak of one loose wheel echoed rhythmically across the marble. Weeks ago, Brooks had threatened to write him up for making too much noise. Today, the sound moved through the room like a metronome counting down the old order. Vanessa stepped away, then paused and looked back. Mr. Brooks, she said, using no title at all. There is a difference between being feared and being respected. You built the wrong one. Then she walked toward the elevators, and every eye in the lobby followed her, not the man on the bench. Rain continued through the afternoon, turning Constitution Avenue into a mirror of gray sky and red brake lights. Inside the Jefferson Federal Center, the weather seemed to have moved indoors. Tension hung in every corridor, thick and electric, as if the building knew more doors were about to open than anyone expected. On the 6th floor, conference rooms that usually hosted budget meetings and polite presentations now held federal agents reviewing records line by line. Printers ran nonstop. Phones rang unanswered. People who once moved with confidence suddenly walked carefully, carrying boxes with both hands. Down in the lobby, Daniel Brooks remained on the bench, though the bench no longer felt like a place to sit. It felt like a display. Employees passed him in steady streams. Some glanced once and looked away. Others looked longer than they ever would have dared before. A courier in a soaked jacket stopped near the visitor desk and asked loudly where temporary badges should be returned. Brooks almost answered out of habit, then realized no one was asking him. His authority had not been taken in one dramatic moment. It was dissolving in hundreds of small ones. Agent Miller emerged from the elevators with 2 investigators and a banker's box sealed with evidence tape. She placed it on the counter where Brooks could see the label. Precinct Storage Unit C. Interesting collection, she said to no one in particular. Missing complaint files and signed statements and camera logs marked destroyed. Brooks stood up too quickly. You cannot pin every paperwork issue on me. Miller turned slowly. No one said every issue. The lobby went still again. Vanessa Carter stepped out moments later, carrying a tablet and a folded umbrella someone had offered her. She looked neither hurried nor triumphant. She looked like someone doing necessary work. Officer Brooks, she said, I need clarification on 3 signatures. He hesitated. I want a lawyer. That is your right, Vanessa replied. This is not an interrogation. It is an opportunity to tell the truth before documents do it for you. She opened the tablet and displayed scanned forms. Visitor denials. Incident summaries. Use of discretion memos. Each carried initials matching his. Brooks studied the screen, searching for escape in paperwork he once considered invisible. Everyone signs those, he muttered. Vanessa nodded. And yet only one pattern follows: race, neighborhood, and surname. She tapped again. Charts appeared. Names grouped by zip code. Wait times compared. Secondary screenings concentrated in the same communities. Complaints dismissed in matching language month after month. Numbers can be colder than witnesses and harder to intimidate. Brooks felt several people watching from the coffee kiosk behind him. He recognized one of them, a veteran he had once made empty his backpack twice in the same week. The man did not look angry now. He looked vindicated. That was somehow worse. Upstairs, a commotion briefly stirred, then faded. Moments later, Captain Hayes was escorted through the lobby carrying a cardboard box with framed awards stacked on top of office supplies. No handcuffs, no spectacle, just a man walking past the same people he once expected to impress. Hayes tried not to meet anyone's eyes. Brooks instinctively stepped toward him. Captain. Hayes kept moving. Talk to your attorney. The words were clipped, frightened, and final. Brooks stopped cold. Loyalty, he discovered, often expires the moment consequences begin. Vanessa watched Hayes exit through the revolving doors into the rain. Then she turned back to Brooks. "For years you thought protection meant friendship," she said quietly. "Protection only lasts until self-preservation arrives." He stared at the wet street beyond the glass. "What happens now?" Vanessa considered the question. "Now the building relearns fairness. Now witnesses become records. Now people who were ignored are heard in order." She closed the tablet. "And now you decide whether your first honest act comes late or never." The janitor rolled past again, this time humming softly. The loose will no longer squeaked. Someone had fixed it. Brooks noticed the sound immediately because when a room stops fearing one man, it finally has time to repair everything else. By early evening, the rain had stopped, but the city outside still glistened under streetlights and passing headlights. Inside the Jefferson Federal Center, fluorescent lights reflected across clean marble floors that suddenly looked brighter than they had that morning. It was not the bulbs that had changed. It was the atmosphere. Fear leaves residue. Once removed, everything appears sharper. Daniel Brooks remained near the lobby bench, though no one had asked him to stay there. He simply had nowhere else to stand. His locker access had been suspended. His precinct phone had been collected. The badge that once opened doors now sat sealed in an evidence pouch behind the desk. He kept glancing at it the way some men stare at old photographs, hoping memory can reverse time. Vanessa Carter stood at the reception counter reviewing final summaries from the day. Agent Miller handed her a stack of signed statements clipped in neat order. 23 witness accounts, 6 employee declarations, 3 maintenance records confirming disabled cameras, 2 internal emails linking Captain Hayes to complaint suppression, and 1 handwritten note from the janitor that simply read, "Thank you for listening." Vanessa folded the note and placed it carefully inside her folder. Some evidence belongs in archives. Some belongs in the heart. Brooks watched her and finally spoke with none of his old volume left. "Why did you come yourself?" Vanessa looked up. "Because leaders should witness what their signatures affect." He frowned. "You could have sent anyone." "I know," she said. "That is why I did not." The answer lingered between them. Brooks had spent years sending others to do the unpleasant parts of power. He had never considered that true authority might move in the opposite direction. The revolving doors turned as evening staff entered for night shift. A young black woman in a security trainee uniform stepped into the lobby, saw the agents, saw Brooks, and hesitated. Her supervisor leaned close and whispered something reassuring. She straightened her shoulders and continued to the desk. Vanessa greeted her first. "Welcome to your first day." The trainee smiled nervously. "Thank you, ma'am." Brooks lowered his eyes. He knew that face. Months earlier, he had told the same woman to come back when she looked more professional, though her uniform had been immaculate. Tonight, she stood where he once blocked her. History does not always roar. Sometimes it quietly changes who gets through the door. Agent Miller approached with another document. Administrative Review Board scheduled for 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Brooks took the paper with unsteady hands. "Is there any chance to fix this?" Vanessa considered him for a long moment. "Consequences are not the opposite of fixing something," she said. "Sometimes they are the beginning." He stared at the form. "I made mistakes." "Yes," she replied. "But mistakes are accidents. Patterns are choices." The lobby fell quiet again. Somewhere upstairs, a vacuum cleaner hummed. A copier clicked. Normal sounds were returning to a building that had spent years adjusting itself around one man's moods. Brooks looked toward the front windows where his reflection mixed with the city lights outside. Without the badge, without the posture, without people shrinking around him, he appeared smaller than he remembered. "What if I had treated you differently this morning?" he asked. Vanessa picked up her umbrella and folder. "Then today would still have come," she said. "Just with less embarrassment for you." She started toward the doors, agents falling in beside her. Halfway there, she stopped and turned back one final time. "Mr. Brooks, every room teaches people how to behave. For years, this one learned fear from you. Tomorrow it begins learning fairness from everyone else." Then she walked into the cool Washington evening, heels tapping steady across the stone steps. The trainee took her place at the desk. The janitor polished the last fingerprint from the counter. Employees spoke at normal volume. And Daniel Brooks sat alone beneath the security cameras he once controlled, finally understanding that the loudest sound in the building was not power leaving. It was dignity returning. The next morning arrived clear and cold, the kind of Washington morning that makes every building look sharper against the sky. Sunlight spilled across the front steps of the Jefferson Federal Center, catching the bronze letters above the entrance and warming stone that had felt heavy the day before. Inside, the lobby opened at 7 o'clock with a different rhythm. People still hurried to meetings. Elevators still chimed. Security scanners still beeped. But no one flinched when footsteps approached. No one studied faces to predict moods. The room had stopped bracing itself. At the front desk, security trainee Maya Reynolds stood in a pressed Navy uniform, posture straight, hands steady as she greeted visitors one by one. "Good morning. Please place your bag on the belt." "Thank you, sir. Welcome in." The words were simple, but they carried something the building had been missing for years. Respect without suspicion. Brooks entered through the side door at 7:15, dressed in civilian clothes and carrying a plain folder under one arm. Without the uniform, many people did not recognize him at first. Those who did looked once and returned to their business. He paused at the security line, uncertain where to stand. Yesterday, he had controlled the line. Today he was in it. Maya glanced up, recognized him immediately, and said the same thing she said to everyone else. "Good morning. Please place your items in the tray." No sarcasm. No revenge. No extra delay. Just fairness. Brooks obeyed in silence. The tray slid through the scanner with a soft mechanical hum. For reasons he could not explain, that small ordinary sound embarrassed him more than public disgrace had. On the 8th floor, the Administrative Review Board convened in a conference room lined with flags, framed mission statements, and a city skyline visible through tall windows. Vanessa Carter sat at the far end of the table beside Agent Miller and two compliance attorneys. She had changed nothing about her manner. Same measured posture. Same calm eyes. Same refusal to perform power when she already possessed it. Brooks was invited in at 8 sharp. No one raised voices. No one dramatized the moment. Truth often arrives in paperwork and plain questions. He was asked about camera blind spots, complaint dismissals, selective screenings, and falsified timestamps. At first, he tried the language he had always used. Miscommunication. Procedure. Misremembered details. But each phrase was met by documents, logs, witness statements, and dates precise enough to strip excuses bare. After 40 minutes, Brooks stopped talking. He looked out the window toward the Washington Monument standing in the distance, white and still against the blue sky. "When did it start?" he asked quietly. No one answered because no one knew what he meant. He swallowed. "When did I become that person?" Vanessa folded her hands on the table. "Usually it starts the first time someone is rewarded for disrespect," she said. "Then it grows every time no one corrects it." The room went silent. Brooks nodded slowly, as if hearing his own biography read back to him. "I thought people feared me because I was strong." "No," Vanessa replied. "They feared inconvenience. There is a difference." By 10 o'clock, the board issued its findings. Immediate termination. Referral for further federal review. Mandatory release of affected complaint records for reopening. Retraining and external oversight for building security operations. The words were formal, but their meaning was simple. The old system would not be returning. Brooks signed acknowledgement forms with a hand that shook less than yesterday. Strange what honesty can steady. When the meeting ended, he stood to leave, then paused near Vanessa. "You could have humiliated me." She gathered her files. "You did that yourself," she said gently. "My job was to stop it from continuing." He nodded once and walked out. Down in the lobby, Maya welcomed another line of visitors. The janitor laughed with a receptionist near the coffee kiosk. Someone held the elevator for a stranger. No one noticed Brooks cross the marble floor and step into the sunlight beyond the doors. For years he believed being seen was power. That morning, he learned something rarer. Sometimes justice begins the moment attention moves on. 3 weeks later, the Jefferson Federal Center felt less like a fortress and more like a public building again. Morning light poured through the tall glass entrance and reached halfway across the marble floor before the first rush of visitors arrived. The security line moved quickly, but not harshly. Questions were asked with courtesy. Bags were checked with consistency. People who had once entered with shoulders tense now walked in carrying coffee cups, folders, and ordinary expressions. Fear had been replaced by routine, and routine can be a beautiful thing when it is fair. Maya Reynolds no longer wore the trainee patch on her sleeve. Her nameplate now read Security Officer, polished bright above her pocket. She had become known for something rare in government buildings. She remembered names. Veterans received greetings. Delivery drivers were thanked. Elderly visitors were offered chairs before they asked. The same scanner stood in the same place, but it served a different culture now. Upstairs, conference rooms once used to bury complaints now hosted monthly transparency reviews. Incident reports were logged publicly. Camera maintenance schedules were posted. Community representatives sat in meetings that previously happened behind closed doors. Small changes rarely trend online, yet they are the way institutions learn to breathe again. Vanessa Carter returned that morning for a follow-up inspection. She walked through the lobby with the same navy blazer, the same measured pace, and the same black briefcase that had become almost legendary in hallway whispers. Employees noticed her and smiled openly. The janitor gave a respectful nod from across the floor. A receptionist waved from the elevator bank. Maya greeted her with practiced confidence. "Good morning, Director Carter. Welcome back." Vanessa smiled. "Good morning, Officer Reynolds. How is the building treating people?" Maya glanced around the lobby, where visitors moved without hesitation. "Much better than before." Vanessa signed the guest log, though no one would have required it. True authority often follows the rules most carefully. As she crossed the lobby, she noticed something mounted beside the front desk where an outdated poster used to hang. It was a framed statement in clear black lettering. "Every person enters with equal dignity. Report misconduct immediately. Respect is procedure." Vanessa paused for a moment, reading each line. Agent Miller stepped beside her. "Staff voted on the wording," she said. "Turns out they had ideas all along." Vanessa nodded. "Most people do. They just need room to speak." Later that afternoon, she visited a community roundtable on the second floor. Local attorneys, church leaders, business owners, and residents shared experiences about access, trust, and accountability. Some stories were painful, some hopeful. All were heard fully. At the back of the room sat an unexpected face. Daniel Brooks, dressed plainly, hands folded, saying nothing. He had enrolled in a mandated ethics and bias accountability program tied to the federal review process. Several people recognized him. A few stiffened. Vanessa noticed, but did not react. During open comment time, Brooks slowly stood. The room tightened. He cleared his throat. "I spent years believing authority meant control," he said. "I was wrong." He looked around the room without hiding. "People paid for that mistake. I cannot undo it. I can only stop denying it." Then he sat down. No applause followed. None was owed. But no one interrupted either. Sometimes accountability begins not with forgiveness, but with silence that allows truth to stand on its own. When the meeting ended, people filed out in small groups. Some ignored Brooks. Some glanced at him briefly. One elderly man simply said, "Learn from it." Outside, evening sun turned the federal building windows gold. Vanessa stood on the steps and looked back through the glass at the lobby inside. Maya was helping a woman with a stroller through the scanner. The janitor was laughing with two clerks. A line moved smoothly without raised voices. The same walls remained. The same doors remained. Yet everything had changed. Because buildings do not become just when they are impressive. They become just when the people inside decide dignity is not optional. Months passed, and the Jefferson Federal Center no longer carried the quiet weight of what had happened that morning. It carried something else now, something lighter but stronger, like a building that had finally remembered what it was meant to be. The marble floors still reflected footsteps, the elevators still opened and closed with their familiar chime, and the long lines still formed at 8 in the morning. But there was no tension in the air, no invisible hierarchy deciding who belonged and who did not. People entered as people, not assumptions. Maya Reynolds had become more than just a security officer. She had become a standard. New hires were trained under her watch, not just on procedure, but on presence. "Treat everyone the same," she would say, not as a rule, but as a foundation. Visitors noticed it immediately. Some even said it out loud. "This place feels different." And it did. Because fairness, once practiced consistently, becomes visible. On the third floor, a new office had been established for internal accountability review, staffed by a rotating team that included community representatives. Reports were no longer buried. They were addressed. Patterns were no longer ignored. They were studied. And slowly, trust began to rebuild, not through speeches, but through repetition. The kind that cannot be faked. Vanessa Carter did not return often, but her presence was still felt in the systems she left behind. Policies she signed. Protocols she enforced. Standards she refused to lower. Her name was mentioned less over time, which was exactly how she preferred it. Because when a system works, it does not need a hero. It needs consistency. One late afternoon, as golden lights stretched across the lobby floor, Daniel Brooks stood outside the building, across the street, watching. He had not worn a uniform in months. The federal review had concluded with formal sanctions, required training, and permanent dismissal from service. His name no longer opened doors, but it followed him in quieter ways. In job applications left unanswered. In conversations that ended too quickly. In reflections he could not avoid. He watched as people entered the building without hesitation. A young mother pushing a stroller. A contractor carrying blueprints. An elderly man with a cane. No one stopped longer than necessary. No one was questioned differently. No one was made to feel smaller. Brooks took a slow breath. For the first time, he understood something he had never allowed himself to see. The building had not changed because one person fell. It had changed because many people finally stood. Across the street, the American flag moved gently in the late afternoon wind, steady and quiet. Brooks turned to leave, then paused for a moment longer. Not to regret, not to justify, just to acknowledge. Inside the lobby, Maya greeted another visitor with the same calm tone she had practiced every day. The janitor wiped down the counter, leaving no trace of the past behind. Conversations flowed at normal volume. Laughter returned without hesitation. And above the entrance, carved in stone, the word justice remained exactly where it had always been. But now, for the first time in a long time, it meant something real to the people who walked beneath it. Because justice is not built in one moment. It is built in every moment after, when people choose to do better, even when no one is watching. And in that building, on that quiet afternoon, it was finally being practiced exactly that way.